So welcome everybody to the first Kanban Coaching Exchange of 2021. It's fantastic to see so many regular faces, but also fantastic to see so many new faces as well. This evening, Vlad and I have got an awesome speaker for you. I'm going to build him up, so he better not let me down on this bad boy. So I first come across Clarke probably about 2 years ago now. I just told him this story, but I work as a trainer and I quite often speak to people about bottlenecks. And it was where I then first came across Clarke's book, The Bottleneck Rules. Reasonably priced, very quick to read, and it's fully educational. But what it did was it kind of gave me a richness of language to be able to explain different types of bottlenecks within your system and how you can overcome them. And I think what I love is just the simplicity and the ability to be able to get that information over. And so when we kind of like woke up in the COVID world, who would I want to have on the top of my book list? Clarke Ching. Who better to come and speak to you tonight? So Clarke is an author. He has a couple of books. I'm sure he's probably got another one in the pipeline. You never know. Very into the theory of constraints, which is kind of what sits behind his books. Vlad's favourite book is Rolling Rocks Downhill. So definitely worthwhile checking that one out, as shown by Clarke himself. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Clarke. We will take some questions at the end. If you put anything in the chat window, then we will capture those. But also, you know, there's going to be some interactive questions, so keep an eye on what's going on. And if it's okay, pop yourself on mute. We love your kids, but we don't necessarily need to hear them all the time, okay? So without ado, I'm going to hand you over to Clarke.
On the back wall there is one of my favourite things. You can't quite see it, but it's a sketch note someone did of a talk that was done before I'd finished writing this. So I've been talking about this stuff for a long time now. And I hope, my intention with this is I want to help you all realise just how amazing the theory of constraints is. So you go off and learn more about it. Forget the silly big name, theory of constraints, like three of the world's most boring words shoved together. It's just really practical now, and I'll show you that at the end. And my intention there is to show you something that might be really obvious to you, but for a lot of people, it's like, oh, okay, that looks a lot easier than I thought, which is how to get your customer engaged. Because the short version of this is that in most Agile and Kanban teams, most software development teams, the customer is inside your business and not outside. So they are a bottleneck inside your business. If you don't have enough customer engagement, that's a capacity problem. And it's at the front of your system, and it's costing your business, no matter how small, it's costing your business hundreds of thousands each year. But people mistake the busyness of everyone being busy working on stuff for productivity, and they don't address it. So I'm going to show you how to address this in a little bit. Okay, right. So this is a talk at the high level. It's theory of constraints, 401, right? But it's for beginners. And the actual purpose at the end of it is I'll give you some very practical ways of thinking about how to get your customer engaged, because they are your bottleneck. Now, I've got to apologize again. The way I've structured my slides, they don't look beautiful, but tough. The stuff that's in there will be very useful. I've kind of structured it as a little bit of a draft of if I was telling a story, which has a hero in it, which is what you guys will be, and it has a problem. Hero has a problem, and has a villain, and all sorts of stuff like that. And so I hope it will relate. But I haven't turned it into a proper story, so it's not beautiful. It's draft-ish. So there, just so you know, that's the official map of the world now. We are completely shut off from everyone over here in New Zealand. So we had New Zealand taken off the map. You've got to know where it is if you actually want to come here. But in theory, we're down here somewhere. And if there are two islands down here like this, I am just there in Nelson at the top of the South Island. Sunniest part of New Zealand, really nice place to live. I was born here, but I lived in Scotland and Ireland for 20 years and just moved back recently. Right, so these are my my books. You'll see these two here, Rolling Rocks Downhill, this one here, business novel. It's surprisingly easy to read and surprisingly informative. This one here, I'll give you a link for to get a freebie copy of this in just a moment. The Bottleneck Rules. This one's the one that's done really well recently. It was the second best-selling leadership book on Amazon.com. Not last year, the year before last. Now, just for a few days, without any advertising or anything. And above it was Stephen Covey's 7 Habits, and below it was How to Win Friends and Influence People. So I'm quite pleased with that. It's been in the Guardian and it's done really well. I have also on the books here. This is Rocks into Gold. Is a tiny little book that. And I think about 2007, 2008, when the economy was crumbling with the financial crisis, I sat down and wrote that to help people think about how they can use Agile to make more money when they didn't have much money. And this one here was an interview I did with Ali Goldratt, who is the founder of the Theory of Constraints, just before he passed away about 10 years ago. And if you happen to be an advanced ToC person, that's really, really interesting reading. If you're not, you might come away needing to have a little bit of dark room time to recover. And this one here, coming out in about 6 weeks or so, is a book called Corkscrew Solutions. It's about using what's called integrative thinking, a really clever way of solving problems that you have all day, every day, really easy ones, really tricky problems where you're stuck between two choices. You have a dilemma and you're in a bind and you don't know what to do. And there's a lovely way of approaching those. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants of that book, but it's just a nice simplification of, if you know Theory of Constraints, the evaporating cloud tool. If you'll hear a lot of people talk about not choosing between options, but choosing the best of both options. It's how to do that. Right, so there we go. If you look at share.toc.guide, you can grab a freebie copy of this. You will put your email and address in. I only send out useful emails. If you don't want to be on my email list, just click unsubscribe the moment you've got it. I don't check that stuff. I won't hunt you down, and I won't be angry. I would just be delighted if you read this and put it to use.
The tool needs to be modernised. We're not travelling by.
That's what I thought too. Okay, so the hero in this story has a problem, right? So this is the beginning of our story. The hero, this person here, has a problem. So this person isn't the hero. And when you go back to work tomorrow, when you think about this stuff, put yourself in the Yoda position rather than the Luke Skywalker position. Try and use this stuff to make other people into heroes rather than yourself. But the problem is on all of these Agile teams, all of these Kanban teams, they find it very easy, or not very easy, but often they found it over time. They got the team working really well. And the one problem that they have is that their customer isn't fully engaged. And they know that they would deliver more value if the customer was more engaged. But even from a logistical point of view, there's delays. So if you've got a customer and they're hard to get hold of because they're the head of something, and maybe they're the sponsor, you've got product owner, it could be product owner, it could be a sponsor, someone who's guiding your project and helping you solve the hard problems, figuring out, prioritizing, choosing what, where you should go, stuff like that. If you need to get questions answered from them and you don't get access to them, then you're going to get a lot of delays. And so what happens when you get a lot of delays is, say you're busy, I need an answer from them. You go, oh, I can't get it. They're not there. What will I do? Oh, I'll start something else. So you increase WIP while you're waiting for answers and time with your customer. You start multitasking your stuff, and that dilutes the effort that you're working on, but it keeps you busy. And this is one of the things you'll hear me say a lot here. Busyness is not the same as productivity. That's why we don't like WIP. We prefer low WIP. We like to get stuff done rather than have just be busy. So busy is nice, but it's actually tends to slow everything down by diluting it. When the team does get together with their customer and they have time, normally they have a short window and they have a whole lot of stuff to pack in, so they rush stuff. And that means also that the customer actually rushes making important decisions as well. So they tend to rush through stuff. They have a big list. They rush. So what it means is that the resulting garbage in to the team actually ends up causing rework later. So you're busy doing something and the customer's thinking, oh yeah, that'll do. And hey, look, these guys are very flexible. They're very agile. If I don't like it later, I can have a look at it and I just get them to change it. In the old days, we used to call that rework and we would avoid it. But a lot of the iteration and a lot of the change that we have could be avoided. Not all of it. Some of it's good learning, but a lot of it could be avoided with a little bit more time to have thought up front. The customer, this is an interesting one. The customer feeds in low value, higher effort work into the team just to keep them busy. So just imagine this scenario. You've got a team here, you've got 15 people in this team that they're busy here. Your customer hasn't got time to feed you good quality fuel into your team to work on, but they've got a backlog. And I'm sure you've seen this. Maybe you've even helped them do this. They've got a backlog and they're looking through and they go, I've got to feed these people with stuff to work on. And at the top of the backlog is something that's going to take them 2 months to think about. It's really, really, really important. But it's only once they've finished it, it's only going to give the team about a week's worth of work to do. Further down the bottom of the list, they find something that's a reverse. It's very easy for the customer to prepare and to hand into the team, and it's going to give them 3 months worth of work. So if you're the customer and you're under a lot of pressure to keep this team of 15 people busy and working and productive, you'll be very tempted not to pick the one that's going to cause you a lot of stress, but you'll go down the list, it's still on the backlog, and you'll find stuff that's lower value and you'll pass it to the team to buy yourself some breathing space. This happens, you may not notice it, but it happens all the time. It's just human nature. The lower value part is one part of it. Hang on. I'm not sure if I have the next point there, but another part of it is that they'll often actually pass lower quality fuel into a team. So I'm the customer, I'm really, really busy. I've got stuff that they need to work on. I'll work on it and I'll get it to a point, but then I'll pass it in and I'll keep the team busy, and they will be busy, but like I said before, it will result in rework. So there's an imbalance there. What you ideally want is you want your customer to have plenty of time so they give you high value, quality inputs. I don't think that there's any debate about that, but more often than not, we end up in the exact opposite situation. So what happens when this is all going on? You've got a team that's busy, that wasn't being fed enough work, so they get fed work. Some of it results in rework, and some of it, sorry, I have another technical issue here. There we go. What happens is that you end up with a team that's working on lower value stuff that is high effort. And then despite it being the customer who's up front, being the bottleneck, the customer complains because the teams look really, really sluggish. They look slow. Why does everything take so long? And one of the reasons is there's a lot more rework than's necessary. And the other bit is that they're feeding stuff into the team that is deliberately going to take a long time. So the customer complains, they complain to the CEO or the CIO, those teams are very sluggish. And I'm sure you've seen this where you get an agile team or a Kanban team who's sitting there and they're working really, really, really hard and the customer complains that they're slow, but they know they're working hard, and they know they're actually so much faster than they used to be. And it's a really horrible feeling because you've been told you're slow, but we're not slow. We're really, really, really quickly. And what's happening is this stuff here. They look sluggish because a lot of the rework is making things take longer. And it's all because of bottlenecks at the front of the system. And I think that sucks. So the team now, we're in story mode now. So we had a hero, which is that the team is the hero here. We have a problem, and now they identify a villain. So they identify a villain, and they think the villain is the agile customer. They don't care about this. They're over there in their marketing offices or wherever, and all they do is complain that we're slow, but they don't give us enough time. And so we get angry, understandably, and we point the fingers out at them. But they're not really the problem. But it takes a guide. And so I'd like you guys to all think, when you go back to the office or back on Zoom or Microsoft Teams tomorrow, you think of yourself as the guide here. So the guide's the person, Yoda, the Yoda person who helps them see what's actually going on. And so in this case, the guide points out the real villain. And because I have got like Yoda here speaking, I've put it in Yoda speak, and Yoda says, well, at the front of your system is your system's bottleneck. And you go, huh? What the heck does that mean? In really simple terms, it is your customer, in terms of a flow system, your customer who's at the front of the system is the bottleneck. But you're not managing them as if they're a bottleneck because you think of them as being outside of your system. So if you were to imagine there's you quite often you'll do this, you go and say, let's draw a picture of your system and figure out what your bottleneck is. And people start and they go, here it is, or that they maybe they even point to a Kanban board. And they go, well, there it is, it's up there. The first step is we get some stuff in and we tidy up a story or something like that. And then we do this, and then we do this, and then we do this, and then we ship it. And oftentimes the circle that they draw, the customer is on the outside. But in terms of flow, the customer is still part of that system. And they're actually inside, and they are the weakest link in the system, and they're at the very, very front. This is really counterintuitive, I think, for most people, because most people, I've talked to people about this who've been doing this stuff for a long time, and it takes a little bit of persuading for them to go, oh, actually, I never thought of them as a bottleneck. They're more like a supplier that doesn't give us enough stuff, which is actually when you draw the system, the full system, that's a bottleneck. If you look at the vaccine stuff that's been rolled out at the moment, and they have a shortage of vaccines coming out, if you drew a circle around each GP surgery, you could find a bottleneck inside that system very, very easily. And it should be the GP if you're talking about actually choosing where your bottleneck is. But if you draw it around the whole system, the bottleneck for the one thing that's slowing down is somewhere inside the manufacturing and distribution of the vaccines. If you speed up the distribution, you'll then speed up the flow of the whole system. So this is just this is just human behavior. We tend to focus in and draw the circle that describes the scope of our system too narrowly. But just to sum that up, there is a bottleneck in your system, and it's at the very front, probably. Problem that we try and solve. So let me tell you a little bit about bottlenecks. Okay, now there's a joke, I believe, coming up, and I will point out where the funny bit is. And if you're on video, could you at least pretend to smile when you get to the bit? And sometimes when I present this and I'm in webinar mode, it's really weird. I had 3,000 people on a call, and I was here talking to my laptop, and I got no feedback. And there was even a 1 minute 20 delay that they put in between broadcasting it. So it's really weird when you're telling a joke. and you have no idea if anyone's even listening. So if you could just do this when you get to the funny bit or something, and I'll point it out just so it doesn't get awkward. Okay, so bottlenecks 101. This will save you reading the book, but read the book. It's got a lot of really advanced stuff in there that's actually really simple. So bottleneck, I don't have a bottle. This is a jar, right? But it doesn't really have a bottleneck. It has a light bulb in it. There's a wine bottle there on the screen. The word bottleneck literally refers to the neck of the bottle, the skinny bit, this bit here. So just always go back to absolute fundamentals when you want to think about bottlenecks. This out there when it gets turned over, and this narrow bit here will determine the flow of the entire system. So you guys all do Kanban, and it's all about flow, right? So the bottleneck is the narrow bit, the narrowest part of the system. There's another bottle there. This is a lovely hot sauce here in New Zealand. And now there's an interesting thing here with this sauce is that there's a bottleneck in here. See the bottleneck here? It looks like it's that wide. Actually, it's got because it's hot chili sauce, it's got a very narrow neck built into it. And that's deliberate because bottlenecks are really useful. You wouldn't want to swap and put your hot sauce into a wine bottle because when you pour it out, the hot sauce will come out, it will pour out too quickly. And likewise, so the neck that deliberately controls the flow, which is a really, really good thing. So if they wanted this bottle here to be twice as fast, they would just make the neck wider. Now, if you swapped over and you put your wine in this bottle here, you would run the risk, I'm told, of dying of sobriety. Which is probably, that wasn't the joke, by the way, that's probably not something you want to risk. So bottlenecks, when they're in the wrong place, are bad, but when they're in the right place, they're actually really, really good. And they give you control. Not like as in command and control, which we don't like, but as in I'm in control of my car and driving it, and I'm not going to crash, and I can control how fast I go. Okay, so bottlenecks are only bad if they're not managed. So let me just give you a little example here. Here's a board. It might look like a Kanban board, I guess, but this is actually they weren't a development team. They were a bug fixing team and an old financial. There were 17 of them, including the customer. They were working on the oldest, gnarliest bugs, and some of those bugs have probably been around for 20, 30 years. The code was, some of it was 50 years old. I was asked to look at them because they had a whole big pile of defects here on their board, and they were getting through one defect on average per person per month. And they wanted to get through more of them because they had a whole lot of other stuff that was blocked by this particular bunch of defects that actually added no value, getting rid of them apart from letting them start to work on defects later. So this is just, you could go to any software team these days and probably see something like this. Now, you can probably see the bottleneck here already. It's testing. And you know that because I put a red circle around it, but you know it because there's a big build-up of stickies in front of testing here, and you can look at that and think, well, if I sped up a design, if we got another design person in there, sped that up, would it go any faster? And instinctively, you're looking at it and go, nah, it's just going to get stuck in that big red circle there, waiting to be tested. Now, I have bins picking up now, so I'll close my window. So if you just look at this, right, instinctively you look at this, but the team who had this, it had a whiteboard that looked like this, and it had been in front of them for a year and a half, looking like this. In fact, they used to have 3 separate boards, and they got so many stickies on testing that they actually got a separate testing board, but there wasn't room for it, and they put it in another part of the building. which, for people like us, we go, oh, no. So that the whole visual aspect had been separated. But when we moved them together, it was just really obvious that they had a bottleneck then. If they wanted to speed up, they have to go faster in testing. Faster in testing, and also organize themselves to make advantage of where their bottleneck is. So I'm working with this team here, and I knew instantly what where they needed to focus their improvement efforts on. So I asked them, though, I got them all into a room later on and said, look, do you guys know about bottlenecks? And they go, oh, we're programmers, we're this, we're not interested in that kind of thing. Say, okay, right, let me tell you this joke. So here's the bottleneck joke. It actually started out in the 2000s, early 2000s, maybe earlier, as an email joke, which is how email, sometimes I tell this to university students, and they go, people used to send jokes out in email? Wow. So this started out as one of those things way back then. And it was said to have happened in Cheers, but it never actually did. So imagine now we've got Cliff Clavin here, who's the character in Cheers, a bit odd, the odd postal worker. He comes and says to his friend Norm, well, Norm, you see, Norm, it's like this. A herd of buffalo can only move as quickly as the slowest buffalo. See them there? That took me about 3 weeks to do that. So it's very exciting. Yeah, and the slowest buffalo stays at the back. Yeah, so they stay at the back there, so that everyone else can run in front of them because they can run faster. But they run at the same speed as the slowest buffalo, right? Otherwise, if they didn't, they would split apart like this. And when they're split apart, they would be prone to being attacked by wolves. Now, I should do sound effects here, but I'm not going to. There's one there, gets taken out. That's Grandma, that's Auntie Jane, eaten by wolves. And so evolution favored the herds that didn't spread apart. It's interesting there that when they were spread apart, they were actually more easily attacked from all angles. So when these tightly packed herds were hunted, the wolves killed the slowest and the weakest buffaloes. And where were they? They were the guys at the back. And that made the remaining herd stronger and faster. So there's Granny at the back there, but slow, and the wolves come along, they take her out, and then suddenly, everyone else can run faster. Bit tough for Granny, but actually that's probably, I need to change that considering what's going on in the world at the moment. We forget the Granny, but the slowest buffalo, get rid of the slowest buffalo and everything speeds up. So here's the joke, but just warning you. Cliff says that in much the same way, the human brain can only operate as quickly as the slowest brain cells. And now, as we know, excess intake of alcohol kills brain cells. You may see where this is going, but naturally, it attacks the slowest and the weakest brain cells first, obviously. This is just nature. In this way, regular consumption of beer eliminates the weaker brain cells and makes the brain a faster and more efficient machine. And that, Norm, is why you always feel smarter after a few beers. Yay! There we go. Thank you. It's yeah. So I've been telling that joke for the last 18 years, and I don't find it funny anymore. So it's nice to see a little bit of a smile, because I'm still not sure if it's just me or maybe it never has been funny. Okay, so now let's just take that idea. You say you guys hear that joke. There's a copy of it in here. If you go back to your workplace and you go poking around, you'll be able to figure out where the bottleneck is, because it's probably the customer up front. Everyone will think it's probably testing. Or somewhere else. They'll think it's inside, and actually you look and you go, actually, no, if we got more time from our customers, then they will be the bottleneck. And you can use that joke if you want to, I always tell it in a way where I look embarrassed and awkward that I'm telling this joke. I make it, I downplay it so that they are not expecting to an enormous laugh. But that joke carries two really important points in it that apply anywhere and everywhere. So like I'm doing this with a company that has 1,500 developers. The joke applies there at the high level and at the team level. I have used this with, I've used it with the testing stations when they first set them up. That the same idea, bottleneck idea applies. If you want to tell people about this, it's really useful to give them the idea of the bottleneck. And in Kanban land, we already know about WIP. So keeping the team together, keeping the herd running together at the same speed is limiting WIP. So that's that's like job number one. Speeding them up is finding out the one buffalo within the herd that will help them run faster. So you don't have to speed up all the buffalo. You just have to find the one that you can all work together to help them speed up. So in this case, the Agile team, just note, includes the customer. And I'm going to point out something. I've said it a few times, but it might not be obvious how important this is when you say that the customer's not engaged or you don't have enough of their time, you're not describing a competence problem. You might be describing a motivation problem, I'm not sure, but you're definitely describing a capacity problem. And that's the lens that ToC puts on top of this. It's not just limiting WIP and stuff, but it's going, how much? So it's a capacity problem. And if you can distinguish, if you're the sort of person that takes note, take a note that says capability does not equal capacity, because it's a really useful two different things that often get conflated together. So if you imagine now that you've got a customer and they don't have enough capacity to engage with the team, to steer them in the right direction, what they're going to do is do all that stuff that that I described earlier, is that they're going to feed stuff to the team to keep them running, to keep them busy. And now there's a problem here. There's two problems here. One is I'm not sure what happens on the next slide, and I'm going to overtalk this. But just imagine this at the moment. If you're the slowest buffalo here, but you're the leader should be up here like this. See that little chap up there? That leader should be figuring out where you're going. This one here, if you're busy trying to keep up with the rest of the team, then all you can see is buffalo butts in front of you. You should be looking out for the, over here, the sign that says, watch out, there's a cliff. You should be able to have plenty of capacity and time to provide good steerage. Now, it's possible that that's what happens next. No, it's not, so that's good. Right, so if I just play this back, I've tried at the start, just say, look, we've got a problem, right? It's not obvious, it's hidden. And the reason it's hidden is because everyone's busy. But because we don't have this customer who's got enough time to engage with us properly, to give us good steerage, we are still keeping busy. And so what actually happens, everyone looks busy. So you go, oh, everyone's a bottleneck, right? But you're not. You're saying that if you can get more customer time up front, then the bottleneck will not be at the front, which is the worst place for it. It'll be somewhere inside the team. So I'm going to show you now a little bit from here about how to apply what I call the focus formula, which is the formula used for managing bottlenecks. And then, and let me just describe the long-term plan, and we'll just talk about the first bit of it, because that's the most bit. For the first bit is you figure out this focus formula. How do I find and manage my bottleneck? And then if the customer is the bottleneck, you want to focus your attentions on fixing that straight away. Because if you do that without changing anything inside the technical side of your teams, you will deliver an enormous amount more value. I'm not talking about 5%, 10%, 20% improvement, which would be awesome. I'm talking about 2 times, 3 times, 4 times the value will come out because you're working on the most valuable stuff, and you will get rid of a hell of a lot of unnecessary rework. Don't get me wrong, iteration and learning is good, but if it's avoidable just for a little bit of time up front, it's not good. And so that's step 2. You'll focus on fixing the customer and getting that working. And then you'll move to a U-shaped team, which I'll explain briefly later, but really it's just the idea that there's one place where you want your bottleneck to be deliberately. Like on the hot sauce, you want a deliberate bottleneck so that you can control the flow of work for the whole team. And there's one place where you want that. And then the 4th step, which is the hardest, is to then go into a mode of constantly protecting that bottleneck and making sure it doesn't move. And there's some magic you can do around that. But for this stuff, we'll just focus on the focus formula to start with. So here's the focus formula. This took me a long weekend to come up with. I started with the word focus, which is the key thing of what theory constraints is about. So ToC, it's got a bunch of tools, some of it around bottlenecks, some of it around other things. It's figure out, where do I focus my attention? There's a whole lot of things I could fix. Where do I focus my attention? So it's called a backronym, which is where you start with the word and work backwards to make it into an acronym. And so the first word is find. So you find your bottleneck. Okay. If you want to find a bottleneck, easiest way to do that is to sit back and look at your Kanban board and go, where's stuff building up? And it's quite possible in a Kanban board, you will have stuff that's where the bottleneck appears to be wandering around all over the place. That's a special case. What it actually means is that you're going a lot slower than you need to, and the U-shaped team will really help. But I'll come back to that. So once you've found your bottleneck, you just go, oh, there's my bottleneck. And you go, well, how can I optimize them? So now you're focusing right, you're looking right in, you go, there they are. And we're working as a group going, well, how can we help that bottleneck person? So think of the testers and with the whiteboard pictures before. We looked at that and they go, how can they go faster? There was actually nothing that they had there where they looked at themselves. They said, we are actually already, we are super efficient as testers. We are working as hard as we can. And they were optimized. They were really, really, really working hard. And that could normally be quite frustrating. You go, well, I thought we were going to get a huge bump of improvement here. But it turned out that the bottleneck was already very, very efficient and optimized. So we move on to the next 3. I think this will help. Yep, that will help there. The first 2, F and O, apply to the bottleneck, and so does U for upgrade. But the other 3 are where the magic happens. So the coordinate step is, how do we coordinate differently? And I don't want to sum up all that we folk do, but so much of what we do in Agile, Lean, Kanban land, whatever you call it, is around coordination. You know, we just do things in a different order, and we make sure that stuff gets coordinated well. And that for you guys will be fairly obvious when you look at stuff how to coordinate better. The collaboration is how we can help each other. And so with the whiteboard example, for instance, it turned out you've got a whole bunch of people who have too much capacity. That they've got too much capacity compared to the bottleneck. And I remember when we said, well, what can we do? And the obvious thing from coordination point of view is, look, the developers and everyone upstream, the testers, needs to slow down a bit, which is a coordination solution. And then the next bit that comes obviously in that sentence is, and since we're slowing down, let's see how we can help the bottleneck, which is the collaboration. And in this case, they all agreed that the worst thing they could possibly do was to try and get the developers to do manual testing, because they had banned it in that company, because they just found it actually kept everyone busy, but it created more work and stress than they needed to. I think you can use manual testing, but they actually come up with 2 things that were far more useful, which were around the collaboration. That it turned out that the testers were very efficient, but they actually spend a lot of their time waiting for help from the developers because their test systems kept dying. So they lost a lot of time just while they didn't have test systems. So the developer says, well, why don't we just fix up your systems? We've got time to do it now that we're slowing down. And we will make sure that you guys have far more availability of test system. And that was like a no-brainer, but they've been working this way for many years, and they'd never thought to do that. The second thing that they did was that although they had banned manual testing, with the developers doing manual testing, the tester said, well, you're not allowed to do that, but I don't suppose you could key in test data. And one of the developers said, you key in your test data. We've all got scripts that run ours. Would you like us to, why don't we take those scripts and we'll just set them up and you can run them, or we could run them for you and set up test data for you. And so they did that, and that took a lot of effort away and automated it, and it allowed the testers to use their brains much more than their fingertips. So that's what collaboration is. It's the non-bottlenecks looking and just going, how can we help the bottlenecks? And you'd be surprised how often a little bit of chatting and thinking about this stuff can make a huge difference. So let's coordinate and collaborate. Curate is where the magic happens, I think. And I'm just going to give you an example of it so you know what it means. You can read more about it in the book. But curate is looking at, I've got a precious resource here, which is my bottleneck. How can I look at the work that's coming in and make sure that it suits the bottleneck best? So, you know, a museum has a curator. You know, they have a precious amount of space. That's the public display space, and that's their bottleneck. But they have tons and tons of stuff in storage, and their job is to figure out how to curate the stuff that they take out of storage and put it in front of the public. So that's what curation is. And with the developers, so with the whiteboard example, one of the things they did with Curate is they looked at all of these incoming defects that they had here that they were supposed to be fixing, and they divvied them up according to stuff that they thought would be easy to test and really hard to test. And they focused on the ones that would be easy to test to start with, because that meant that they would actually get through a lot more because it required far less bottleneck time. Okay, now really quickly, the upgrade step is just, oh no, my PC's running too slow. I might upgrade the hard disk to an SSD, or I need to upgrade the memory, or actually, look, the PC's sitting there and I can hardly do my work. Actually, I need to upgrade my PC and get a new one. So just think of that. Upgrade is usually where you actually go out and make a big decision and buy some more bottleneck capacity. And then the last one is start again strategically. And the start again bit means it's a loop. Your bottleneck will move around. You want to make sure it moves to the right place. Okay, so yeah, you can all learn this here from this, and that whiteboard example is in the book. It applies everywhere. If you take this, you read this, you get knowledge, you see bottlenecks, you'll have a way of managing them, you have a way of thinking about them. Wherever you work, you be the guide and you work with the local heroes who have the local knowledge, and then you help them together. You facilitate them figuring out how to manage their bottleneck. Right, I'm going to move on and go to questions in just a little bit, but I'm going to finish here by showing you very quickly a different way of thinking about when your customer's not engaged, which is, let me go back here. So you've now got kind of like bottleneck 101 stuff here. You've still got a customer who's not engaged. Now, one of the things, well, the first thing is we want to focus our brains on this, the customer, and use the focus formula to help them become more optimized, and then to coordinate to help them. But what you don't want to do is try and sell them on Agile or Kanban or the benefits of doing it, because they probably already know. If they don't, tell them. But if they, it's not a motivation thing. Usually here, it's a capacity thing. It's that they're too busy. So their motivation. Normally we think, hang on, look, we need to motivate these people to get engaged. So go talk to them, sell up the benefits of it, how to make their lives easier and stuff. And they're sitting there going, yeah, I know all that, but I'm really busy. I've got two jobs. I've got my day job, and I've got another job. So what we want to do instead is not try and sell. We want to make it easier for them. So we want to make remove the obstacles. Yesterday, on the other side of the wall here, looking at our kitchen, I saw a guy with a little puppy walking along. And he had I'm not making this up, I've never seen this before. And he's trying to get his dog. His dog's trotting along like this. And the guy had what looked like a fishing line, and dangling down on the end of it was a rope, and had a bone or a toy bone on the end of it. And this dog was busy rushing along, chasing this bone in front of him. So that was like putting motivation there. What we want to do instead is maybe figure out how to put roller skates on the dog's feet if we want to go faster. Or we want to make sure that we take the dog for a walk along a nice path that's not got scary dogs that are scaring it and stuff. So it's not motivation, it's just making it easier. Right. Now, let me show you this. You might want to take a note of this. It's deceptively simple, but I think it's really, really, really helpful. So if you want to make it easy for any bottleneck, but this is just talking about the customer one, we know that's good, right? So sometimes when you look at your customer, let's assume that they're motivated, that they might have, remember before I said capability is not the same as capacity. So we have here the vertical one there. Is capability. How good are they at being a customer for your team? And this one here, we have how much capacity do they give to the team, and is it enough or not? And it's clear that ideally we want them to be up in that corner, but it's useful to think of them along this ways, because the distinction between capability and how much, what are they good at their job versus do they have enough time is huge. So what we want to do, let's say we've got someone over here who's high capability, but they don't have a lot of time. Let me give you an example, and you'll find this stuff is pretty generic, of using the focus formula for someone who's like this. So this was a couple of years ago. It was a senior government civil servant, and they had a project. I don't know, maybe it had 50 IT people working on it, but it was a really big strategic project, so but relatively small. And she was the customer for this, but she was also the customer for a whole lot of operational stuff. And the team were complaining that they didn't have enough of her time. So I just went and talked to her as an outside consultant. I come and just went and talked to her and I listened to all of her problems. She goes, "Oh, I want more out of the team. I would like to do this. It looks like they keep producing stuff that needs to be fixed. And so I have to spend a lot of my time correcting their mistakes and so on and so on and so on. All things that could actually be probably prevented if she had more time." And we talked through, and one of the really important things if you're trying to help people and coach them is to help solve their problems. So she listed all of this stuff, and I, at the end of it, half an hour later, I said, I think if you could get a little bit more time each week just with them, you'd probably be able to help them prevent a lot of their stuff. So rather than fixing it, you could prevent that, help prevent it. She goes, "Oh, but I don't have enough time. I'm too busy." So, "Oh, okay, all right. Well, how much time do you reckon you probably have with them at the moment?" She goes, "Oh, probably each week, maybe 2 hours, 2.5 hours. And a lot of the stuff, is fixing stuff. And I look at that in the evening." Okay. So I'm just wondering how we could get maybe half an hour, maybe an hour extra a week. And don't forget, this is going to prevent a lot of the other work, because I can't see any way I can do that. And so now we've focused, we've found, and we're trying to optimize, and I'm going to skip to coordinate now. So this is a coordination solution. I said to her, look, do you think maybe you could get your personal assistant to just block out 2 half-hour meetings at 9:30 that happen before that team has their stand-up? One say on a Tuesday and one say on a Thursday, just in the little meeting room that's next to them there. Just block that out and have that like as a little office house for the team. It'd just be an hour, half an hour at a time. She goes, oh, well, I could do that, yeah, but what say they don't turn up? And I didn't say anything, and she said, well, if they don't turn up, I could just do emails. And I could probably use that time to just get through some work. That could be quite handy if they don't turn up. So she put that in, and they turned up. And the team turned up, and eventually she expanded it to be more frequent, 3 or 4 days a week. She just built in that office hours. A whole lot of the time when the team came to her, they sorted out problems, and they prevented her having to do a lot more work later. So that was a really, really easy coordination thing, the first C and focus. And another one was that when she had that office hours, I spoke with the Scrum Master and said, hey, look, if this office hours thing's going to work, it'd be really important that you guys all went there with stuff that was kind of prepared, so that you've got her there for that little window. Make the most of her time. Prepare stuff, give options, da-da-da-da-da. And they sat down and they just figured out what they would need to do if they were going to turn up with something that required Joe's input, the sponsor's input. How would they do that in a way that made it easy for her? So they just did a bit more prep work rather than just rushing at her with details. So get really simple little coordination thing. Before they go to the time, they just built in time to make sure that the chats were really high quality. A collaboration thing, which is the second C, they would look at stuff and they'd think, Joe's really busy, and we often ask her a whole lot of stuff, but actually we often know the answers to this, and we know a lot of of the things that she'll say, because we've been working together for a long time, but we don't know what decisions she'll make. So why don't we make sure when we're doing our prep that we actually come up with what we think would be the work that she would do, and then maybe present options that she can choose from to make it easier. So that was taking some of the work that Joe would have had to do, the sponsor, and letting people, other non-bottleneck people, spend their time doing that work. Not taking away the most important bit, which was her decision making, but just offloading some of the hard work that she would have had to do. So that's FOCC. The other ones weren't necessary because suddenly this team ran a whole lot faster, had a whole lot rework, and it actually slowed down because Joe, the sponsor, wasn't working so much in the evening. The team they all started to like each other, and just everything just got a lot calmer and a lot quicker. And that's what, in the diagram here, it moved the capacity problem over there. It just gave Joe, who was the bottleneck, a lot more capacity, but it also got rid of a whole lot of rework, which was had a similar effect. Right, now, just on this one here, it's the same thing. If you've got someone who maybe isn't good at their job, but what you find is that collaboration, the second C, can be really, really, really useful, because it's that, like that example I gave, where the team actually often knows more of the details than the customer does. So if you are in this situation here where you've got a customer who's really keen, but they need just help to do their job, get your analysts to sit down and work through and sit with them and co-create stuff. Don't leave it all on their shoulders. Just help them. And by doing that, you'll increase their capability as well. Now, the last one, sometimes focus will actually take someone here who's, say someone you've got is brand new to this job and they're really, really busy and they don't know what to do. Applying these here, the focus formula, will also help move across here. Though sometimes you need to go to the equivalent of the U, which is the upgrade, which is you might need to actually hire someone to help them out. You might need to hire someone. Say it could the head of this government department could have said, look, Joe, actually, I'm going to take you away from your day job and I'm going to assign you full time to this project that's so important, and I'm going to hire someone else temporarily to take the operational side of your job. So sometimes you have to spend a little money or go a little bit higher in the organization to prioritize this when you're in this more difficult corner. Okay, now I'm going to I'm just to think, if you guys want to think about using this in the real world, that little 2x2 is a really, really, really good place to start. It's also a really good place to start that just assume that your customer is the bottleneck, and then try and prove yourself wrong. Rather than trying to prove that it is the bottleneck, just assume it is and then try and prove yourself wrong. And if it is, just do this and everything will slow down. I'm going to switch the slides off in just a moment, but I just want to tell you that the 4 whiteboard example I showed you, they actually had numbers because of the nature of the work. Their productivity went up in terms of how much they actually delivered by over 30%, just by applying this focus formula to their work. They realized they had too many developers, and they let 2 of the developers leave this team and go to work on project work, which helped the project do a lot better. And it also meant that their costs went down by about 15%. And the bit I love most, when I caught up with the manager a few months later, she said, wow, we have never done so little work. It's lovely. We all go home on time. It's so calm and so relaxed. And yet somehow we're doing 30% more work. So finding and managing your bottleneck has the funny effect of slowing everything down and having people be less busy, but delivering a whole lot more output. And they usually like it a lot more too. Now I'm going to switch this thing off and we can go to questions there. I would hate to think, if I keep talking, you all run at the risk of having what happened to my ancestors when they all moved over here, which is that we had a vowel movement, which is that we only use the I vowel generally, unless we're talking using a word which actually does have the I vowel in it. So if you hear my voice, you might pick that up, and I might change your accent. So why don't you guys ask some questions instead?
Could we start with a few that have already been posted in the chat, and then we'll open up the floor? So
cool.
I have one from Maru, which is which things do you look at first, even when using focus? So I'm assuming which of the letters do you look at first? Is that what you meant? Maru?
Yes, sorry.
So you posted the question in the chat. That said, which are the things that you look at first, even when using focus? Do you mean which of the little initials in the acronym?
No, I mean in the organization. I mean that's why I posted the question afterwards about the value stream. But what do you start with when you're looking to find, let's say, symptoms? Or what's your approach to diagnose? I mean, you can look at a million things, in the organization. It could be knowledge, could be capacity, could be technology, could be infrastructure, could be interfaces, a ton of things, right?
Okay, so I'm not quite sure how to answer. Probably 2 things come to mind immediately. Chase the pain. Go see what people are moaning about, and only try and fix stuff that's causing them pain, and that will help you figure out this is the kind of things that we want to fix, and then go around You've now found an area, and then just go in and just try and untangle what's going on. Don't, for instance, do a value stream map, because you might want to use that later, but you'll just end up documenting a lot of details. Just go and look for the pain, and look for who is suffering, where it looks like work is slow, or where work is being built up, and then go look there. If they know they have a bottleneck, they maybe not feel like they can fix it. It's most likely that they don't actually know about bottlenecks, and they're actually and the most likely thing is that they are trying to keep everyone busy, thinking that's how you be productive. But when you know about bottlenecks, you know that if everyone's busy, then everyone's working fast in the bottleneck, and it's causing a big build-up of WIP. And the WIP makes everyone look productive, but they're just being busy. So yeah, go hunt for the pain, and just when you're doing this, you're just trying to find the one thing that you need to focus on to make everything better. And that means that you can discount most things, and a lot of the pain doesn't actually really matter. It's just business as usual. But you have to go around and talk to people and figure out just where to focus there. The second thing I would say, so that kind of helps you look for the pain, look for the cues. You guys are already looking good at cues, but sorry, good at looking at cues. But if you're doing Kanban, just make sure that if you draw a system that that the circle is actually big enough. If you're drawing stuff, does it actually try and take it out one bit wider? You probably draw the system around where you feel like you have control, your sphere of control. You need to take it out one step wider, and then you'll probably see stuff that you couldn't see before. But one of the lessons that Ali Goldratt, is really counterintuitive. He said that it gets easier to fix things the wider you go. If you try and fix things locally, you're actually very constrained. Go a bit wider.
Yeah, you have a local optimum ping pong. So if I understand well, you ask questions about pains, then you pull the thread, you gradually increase your scope of let's say observation, and then you look for more causalities gradually. Okay.
And if you're doing this stuff here, don't try and boil the ocean with ToC or anything else. This is we're all incrementalists and radicalists at the same time. Us people, because we're drawn to this stuff, so we like big new things. And yet the core of our new thing is incremental change. Just use ToC to figure out where to focus, and that way you get big change. Hang on, my screen suddenly frozen up. Oh no, it's come back. I think I may have disappeared for a moment there.
Just 1 second, you're fine.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm not sure if you heard that. It's a really important point with ToC, Kanban, Agile, everything. When you get good at it, try to do as little of it as you possibly can. Because you now have a huge toolkit of stuff that you can do. Cherry pick from it. So when you're learning this stuff, you go wide and you learn all sorts of stuff. You got a whole lot of stuff in your toolkit. Like the plumber that turns up in their van, they've got a whole lot of equipment out the back that they'll never need. You've got that there. With this, you use ToC as a thinking process to try and figure out where to focus and just do tweaks and as little change as you can. Don't try and use all of the tools in your toolkit. It would be, I think, it's a lot easier.
Thanks.
I'm gonna do 3 more rapid fire at you because they seem like they're pretty good for like these shorter answer sessions. So one was from Just, I'm assuming, or Just. So when you were talking about the team helping the customer, that sounded like offloading the customer by the team that has more capacity. Is that correct?
Yeah. Offloading is a good thing. The bit that's mysterious about offloading is that often the person who picks up the work, sometimes they're not nearly as good as the person that could do it, so it takes some more effort. Sometimes they turn out, oftentimes they turn out to be better at it.
Cool. We have one from Katalin, which asked, could you give us an example of when a bottleneck is useful in business as usual work? How could you look at a bottleneck with love?
Okay. Anytime you go into a stadium, which is like in the old days for a big concert, and they choke the flow of people in and out through the gates, and they actually control the flow of traffic. That's a deliberate bottleneck there that's there for safety, and so that's actually good. You will find that well-run places that feel like they're well run will actually have a bottleneck, and people will instinctively be managing it in a good way. And so I'm funny things. I know lots of examples, but nothing's coming to my my head. But the kind of the rules are, if you don't know about bottlenecks, then you're probably fixing things that aren't going to fix the actual real problem. So you're going to feel busy improving, which is awesome because you feel good because you're improving, but you're not going to be fixing at the bottleneck. So your improvements are actually just going to be changes, not improvements, and they might actually make it worse. When you see bottlenecks and you learn about them, suddenly you go, oh, wow, I can see bottlenecks. And then you suddenly will see them everywhere, and most of them will be beyond your control. But when you find the ones that you can work on, you'll have two options. One is to put up with the bottleneck where it is, which is a good short-term thing, and then manage it. The second one is to figure out where it should be. So if you go to the local airport, gosh, these examples are all so dated, aren't they? You go to the local airport and you discover there's no parking, and you go, oh my God, there's no parking. And the airport has to slow down the number of flights it does because there's not enough parking. Then the bottleneck is definitely in the wrong place. The bottleneck should probably be the runway. So you've got to think between tactical and now bottlenecks and strategic ones. I have no idea what question you asked, but I love my answer. I found it very interesting.
I think we're now gonna. Apologies if I've not tracked down your question in the chat. If you still like to answer it, ask it. Please ask it yourself. So I'm gonna open it up to people who want to ask live questions.
These are bottleneck, by the way.
Oh, okay. We now have props, so like even better.
We've got props. There's a bottleneck, just while you're thinking. See that there? That's a good bottleneck. A lot of systems have a good bottleneck, like a funnel. I'm hopefully doing some work with a big manufacturing company where the bottleneck is in their sales process, which they call their sales funnel. And so bottlenecks are everywhere, but if you can't see them, you can't manage it.
So how are we doing on that hourglass? Because I think that's a good indicator. If we've run out of sand and there are no questions, I think we can let everyone go.
I think so too. Well, thank you very much, Clarke. Should we give him a Zoom round of applause?
Thank you very much. Very welcome.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for getting up like super early. You've still got your whole day ahead of you, but you lucky thing, you are on Friday now, whereas we still have a full day to contend with. So thank you very much. Don't forget, in the chat window, pimp out your email address and get that free book. That's a couple of hours of your life that you will not regret. So make sure that you download that one. And there's other books out there as well that you can have a look at too. So thank you very much to our speaker. I also want to thank Simon Machin for sponsoring our Zoom. He says we can keep it a little bit longer, which means we can hold some of these bigger meetup groups. So that's absolutely fantastic. Next month, we have a talk about Kung Fu Kanban. So if you've not signed up for that bad boy yet, get yourself down on the list, and don't worry, I'll send a reminder out so you can sign yourself up in plenty of time. But that should be another good one as well, with a new speaker that we've not had before. Okay, so that's going to be with Matt Turner. He's a colleague of Ian Carroll, who we had here the other week. So definitely worth signing up for that one. But without further ado, Have a good evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Have a fantastic rest of the day, and I'll see you all next month. From me and Vlad, goodbye everyone and take care. Thanks everyone. Jazz hands.